Mr. Perez, I thank each of you for your testimony here this morning. And again, I mentioned that we will likely see a vote around 11 o'clock, so we'll be moving in and out here, but don't let that reflect a lack of interest. I think the fact that we have 7 members from each side of the aisle here today indicates a clear interest in understanding more of our infrastructure issues, the capacity issues, and I think really the math problem that you have mentioned, Mr. Eisenberg. Mr. Perez, I think you're the only one here on the panel who thinks that we might possibly be suffering from overcapacity. More of what I hear is a concern that we lack capacity not only for the immediate term, but moving forward and understanding what those needs will be, recognizing that building a pipeline today is extraordinarily expensive and extraordinarily costly from a time perspective. I mentioned the fact that the construction of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline was a 3-year construction process, but getting us to that point, I think we will recall the history, was much longer than that. I wanted to ask, let me go to you, Mr. Black. Nobody's really talked about the permitting issues and some of the siting challenges. Maybe it was you, Dr. Parformic, that spoke to the disincentive, if you will, for investment in pipelines, citing things like the regulatory issues, the siting concerns, the permitting. But Mr. Black, can you give us some discussion here on how long permitting is taking for an oil pipeline in the United States? I know we're talking a lot about natural gas here. Talk to me a little bit about just the time involved with permitting a pipeline.
Thank you, Senator. It's taking longer to site many liquids
Define
pipelines.
longer.
I don't have that. By a period of years, sometimes pipelines are taking longer. Of course, Keystone XL is a great example of a pipeline review process that took longer. Liquid pipelines are cited under state laws, so state processes, like in Minnesota for the Sandpiper pipeline, have been lengthened years beyond they should. And then for federal issues, we need to go through federal lands agencies if we pass federal lands or if we need construction-related environmental permits. And in many cases, we're able to get through those processes. We've built more than 20,000 new miles of pipe in the last 10 years, but it's taking longer, and that process adds to the cost of the projects, and those costs can ultimately be passed on to the consuming public.
I want to switch over to jobs for just a moment. I'll probably have an opportunity for a second round here, but there has been some pushback, if you will, when we talk about the jobs numbers, and several of you have laid some significant and some impressive numbers out there that come with the construction of a pipeline. But we hear repeatedly the challenge that you're only creating jobs for that specific period of construction, and therefore these are considered just temporary jobs. We heard that replayed a lot with the Keystone XL. Mr. McGarvey, can you just speak to the jobs issue? Mr. Eisenberg, you talked about kind of the broader impact when you create a pipeline. It's not just the pipe that's bisecting an area, but the implications for broader job creation. But Mr. McGarvey, if you can start, please.
Thank you. You know, that's the language that's been used around that has been a little aggravating. People don't really understand the construction industry. The Hoover Dam was a temporary job. The Golden Gate Bridge was a temporary job, and the new Freedom Tower in New York that rose in place of the Twin Towers was a temporary job. That's the nature of construction. People, through the course of 30 or 40 years, maintain their position in the middle class, going from construction project to construction project. I'm not aware of a project where somebody starts on their first day and ends their career 40 years later on a construction project. So That temporary job thing is a real itch for us. It bothers us greatly. It bothers our members when they talk about these career construction craft professionals just being temporary jobs.
Because they are professional jobs, most clearly. Yeah. Mr. Eisenberg, can you speak very quickly to that in terms of the jobs impact and what it means beyond the actual construction of laying the pipe?
Absolutely. And I'm thank you for raising this. Obviously, through the Keystone process, I mean, where there was a lot of inflamed rhetoric from every side, it was frustrating to hear that there just wouldn't be many jobs. I mean, obviously, there's the jobs for the men and women who are going to be making the pipe and building this facility and operating and maintaining it, and then the manufacturing jobs that from rolling the aluminum and the steel and the things like that actually go into the inputs here, the compressor stations, things like that. Our studies actually looked at this and added up and analyzed both the construction and the operations and maintenance. And so I pulled up the oil study. In 2016, when you add those together, oil pipelines, both construction and maintenance, will contribute 243,167 jobs. 28,438 will be in manufacturing. So the operations and maintenance piece is obviously smaller than construction. These are gigantic construction infrastructure projects, but they're there, and you have to maintain these things. You have to keep them safe. You have to keep them secure, and you have to keep supporting them. Between 32 and 37% of that is going to be from the manufacturing side of it. So these are real jobs. They matter to our members, and obviously we care about them continuing.
Thank you. Senator Kemp.